Every person in this series took an oath. They raised their right hand, swore to defend the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and then went to work. Some of them spent years or decades building careers that looked from the outside like exactly what those oaths promised. They had clearances, commendations, trusted assignments, access to the most sensitive material their country produced. Then they sold it. They sold it to the Soviet Union, to China, to ISIS, or handed it to the world via a whistleblowing website. They did it for money, for ideology, for grievance, for radicalization, or because walking away from their post in the middle of the night in Afghanistan seemed like a reasonable decision. The motives vary, the damage does not. What follows is 10 cases, verified, documented, and sentenced. 10 soldiers and military personnel who swore an oath to America and broke it. Case 1. John Anthony Walker, Jr., Norfolk, Virginia, October 1967. John Anthony Walker, Jr. is 30 years old, a U.S. Navy Chief Warrant Officer running the entire communication center of the Atlantic Fleet Submarine Force. Every encrypted message moving between American submarines and their commanders passes through his hands. He holds a top-secret cryptographic clearance and knows the cipher machines, the rotor settings, and the communication schedules of the most powerful nuclear submarine force on Earth. He also owes money he cannot pay back. Walker was born in Washington, D.C. on July 28, 1937. His father was an alcoholic. His childhood was unstable. He dropped out of high school after attempting a burglary and enlisted in the Navy in 1955 to avoid jail. The military gave him structure, rank, and eventually, a top-secret security clearance that would become the most dangerous thing he ever owned, not to the United States, but to its enemies. By the time Walker reaches his post at Atlantic Fleet Submarine Force headquarters in Norfolk, he has a failed bar, mounting debt, a deteriorating marriage, and a paycheck that covers none of it. His solution is not to find a second job. On a fall day in October 1967, he photocopies a document at headquarters, slips it into his pocket, drives to Washington, D.C. in his red 1964 MG, and walks through the front door of the Soviet embassy. He is not recruited, he is not approached, he volunteers. He hands over a radio cipher card, a physical key that allows encrypted American naval messages to be read, and asks for money. The KGB station chief, Boris Solomatin, meets with him personally, something a station chief virtually never does with a walk-in. Walker impresses Solomatin immediately by making no ideological arguments, no love for communism, no hatred of America, strictly business. Solomatin pays him several $1,000s on the spot and negotiates an ongoing monthly arrangement. Walker is smuggled out of the embassy in a car. What Walker has handed the Soviets in that first meeting is not just a document, it is a permanent window into American naval communications. From this point forward, every encrypted message between the Atlantic Submarine Force and its commanders is potentially readable by Moscow. The operation runs for 18 years. Walker delivers material through dead drops, roadside exchanges where he leaves packages of stolen documents and collects cash without ever meeting his handlers face-to-face. The Soviets give him a device that, when placed on top of a cryptographic machine, records the rotor settings automatically. They pay him between $500 and $1,000 per month in the early years, with individual drops eventually reaching $35,000 and beyond. Federal prosecutors later state at trial that the Soviet Union paid more than $1 million to Walker's ring in total. After retiring from the Navy in 1976, Walker opens a private detective agency in Norfolk and keeps the operation running as a civilian. He recruits Jerry Whitworth, a Navy radio man who becomes his primary inside source on submarines. He recruits his brother Arthur, a retired Navy lieutenant commander working for a defense contractor. He grooms his own teenage son Michael, eventually getting him enlisted in the Navy and assigned to the nuclear aircraft carrier USS Nimitz, where classified documents flow through daily. Secretary of Defense Caspar Weinberger later concludes that Walker gave Moscow access to American weapons and sensor data, naval tactics, surface and submarine training, and readiness procedures. KGB defector Vitaly Yurchenko tells American intelligence debriefers in 1985, "We deciphered millions of your messages. If there had been a war, we would have won it." KGB Chief Solomatin, in his only interview with an American journalist, says flatly, "There has never been a security breach of this magnitude and length in the history of espionage." Walker is caught not by any security system, but by a phone call. His ex-wife Barbara, who has known about the operation for years, calls the FBI Boston field office on November 17, 1984. The initial agents consider her a bitter ex-wife and file the report. A supervisor later finds it during a quarterly review and transfers it to Norfolk. Investigators interview Barbara again, then Walker's daughter Laura, who confirms her father tried to recruit her into the ring while she was serving in the Army. She refused. Both women pass polygraphs. The FBI opens a full investigation codenamed Windflyer. On May 19, 1985, FBI agents follow Walker from Norfolk to a rural road near Poolesville, Maryland, where he tosses a paper bag containing 124 pages of classified documents near a utility pole. And the Soviets never collect the drop. They sense something is wrong. A vice consul spotted in the area drives away without touching the bag and flies back to Moscow 3 days later. Walker spends 2 hours searching for his $200,000 payment at a separate dead drop location, finds nothing, and checks into a Ramada Inn under a false name. FBI agents call his room, tell him his car has been hit in the parking lot, and arrest him in the hallway at 3 o'clock in the morning on May 20th. Michael Walker is arrested 2 days later aboard the Nimitz, where 15 pounds of classified documents are found under his bunk. He has to be escorted off the ship under guard. Arthur Walker is arrested on May 29th. Jerry Whitworth is arrested on June 3rd. Walker pleads guilty to 3 counts of espionage and is sentenced to 2 life terms plus 10 years by U.S. District Judge Alexander Harvey II on November 6, 1986. Arthur receives 3 life terms. Whitworth, who refuses to plead guilty, receives 365 years and a $410,000 fine. Michael, whose lighter sentence was the only thing Walker traded his cooperation for, receives 25 years and is paroled in 2000. John Walker dies in federal prison in Butner, North Carolina, on August 28, 2014, at the age of 77. Arthur dies in the same facility 6 weeks earlier. Neither man sees the outside again after the morning of May 20, 1985. When asked after his arrest how he accessed so much classified information for so long, Walker's answer is 9 words: Kmart has better security than the Navy. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Case 2 brings us inside the FBI itself. A counterintelligence agent named Robert Hansen, who spent 22 years hunting Soviet spies for the United States, while simultaneously reporting everything he found back to Moscow. Case 2. Robert Philip Hansen, Washington. D.C., November 1979. Robert Philip Hansen has been an FBI special agent for 3 years. His job is counterintelligence, hunting Soviet spies inside the United States. He is 35 years old, a devout Catholic, a father of 6 children, and a man who has quietly decided to become the thing he was hired to catch. He walks into a New York front office for Soviet military intelligence and volunteers his services. No recruitment, no blackmail. He offers himself. Hansen was born in Chicago on April 18, 1944. His father was a police officer. He studied chemistry at Knox College, then dentistry at Northwestern, then switched to business, earning an MBA in accounting and information systems. He joined the Chicago police force in 1972, transferred to the FBI in 1976, and was assigned to counterintelligence work against the Soviets. He was quiet, stiff, and socially awkward. Colleagues called him the Undertaker. He wore black suits and kept largely to himself. He believed he was smarter than everyone around him and that the FBI failed to recognize it. His first espionage cycle runs from 1979 to 1981. He passes information to Soviet military intelligence, the GRU, including the identity of an FBI source inside Soviet ranks. He earns around $20,000. His wife Bonnie discovers the activity and confronts him. He confesses to an Opus Dei priest, promises to stop, and donates money to a Catholic charity. He stops contact. In 1985, he starts again, this time approaching the KGB directly with an anonymous letter. He gives them names. 3 Soviet officers who had been secretly working for American intelligence are identified. They are recalled to Moscow, arrested, and executed. Hansen continues rising through FBI ranks, eventually working in senior counterintelligence roles, positions that give him access to the very investigations that might have caught him. What Hansen delivers to the KGB across his career is comprehensive. Approximately 6,000 pages of classified documents and more than 20 computer disks. Details of U.S. nuclear war strategy, developments in American military weapons technology, the identities of Soviet assets working for the United States. On the existence of a secret tunnel the FBI and the NSA had constructed beneath the Soviet embassy in Washington for eavesdropping. Intelligence collection programs, counterintelligence methods, and the names of double agents that American intelligence had successfully recruited inside Soviet ranks. The Department of Justice describes his espionage as possibly the worst intelligence disaster in U.S. history. Throughout the entire operation, 22 years, Hansen never reveals his name, his employer, or his face to his Soviet handlers. He operates only through anonymous letters and dead drops, using the codename Ramon Garcia. He studies FBI files regularly, searching for any sign that he is under investigation. In 1993, during an active investigation into his computer activities, he hacks into a colleague's system, prints a classified document, walks it over to the colleague and says, "You didn't believe me that the system was insecure. The investigation goes nowhere." After the Soviet Union collapses in 1991, Hansen stops contact for 8 years. In 1999, while serving as the FBI liaison to the State Department, he resumes, now working with the SVR, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service that replaced the KGB. He is 2 months away from mandatory retirement when investigators finally close in. The break comes in 2000. The FBI, still hunting for an unidentified mole after the 1994 arrest of CIA officer Aldrich Ames, pays $7 million to a former KGB officer for a file on an anonymous source inside American intelligence. The file contains fingerprints and a voice recording. The FBI matches both to Hansen. On February 18, 2001, investigators track Hansen to Foxstone Park in Vienna, Virginia. He walks down a wooded path to a footbridge and tapes a plastic garbage bag full of classified documents to the underside. As he walks back to his car, an FBI arrest team closes in. A bag containing $50,000 in cash, his payment from Russian handlers, is found nearby. When agents take him into custody, Hansen says, "What took you so long?" He pleads guilty on July 6, 2001 to 15 counts of espionage and conspiracy to commit espionage, avoiding the death penalty in exchange for full cooperation with federal investigators. FBI Director Louis Freeh resigns in the fallout from the case. A Department of Justice Inspector General investigation running to 674 classified pages finds that Hansen escaped detection for over 2 decades, not because he was a master spy, but because of systemic failures in the FBI's internal security program, failures that relied primarily on trusting that FBI agents would not commit treason. On May 10, 2002, Hansen is sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. He is sent to ADX Florence, the federal Supermax facility in Colorado, where he lives out the remaining 21 years of his life alongside convicted terrorists and organized crime figures. He is found dead in his cell on June 5, 2023, at the age of 79 of natural causes. He received $1.4 million total in cash, diamonds, and funds deposited into a Russian bank account. He lived in a modest Virginia suburb, drove ordinary cars, and gave no outward signs of the fortune Moscow was quietly building for him. The people he named are dead. The tunnel he revealed was never used. The assets he burned are gone. Case 3 moves from Washington to a U.S. Army base in West Germany, where a sergeant known to his colleagues as Mr. Plans spent 13 years selling the entire NATO defense blueprint to the Soviet bloc, and was later described by his sentencing judge as the worst traitor since the end of World War II. Case 3, Clyde Lee Conrad Bad Kreuznach, West Germany, 1975. Clyde Lee Conrad is a Sergeant First Class in the U.S. Army's 8th Infantry Division, assigned to the G3 War Plan Section, the office responsible for creating and safeguarding the contingency defense plans for American and NATO forces in Western Europe. His colleagues call him Mr. Plans. His supervisors trust him completely. Several of them have pulled bureaucratic strings specifically to keep him in this sensitive post because he is so reliable, so knowledgeable, and so good at his job. His boss, Sergeant First Class Zoltan Szabo, approaches him and asks if he wants to earn some extra money. Conrad accepts. Conrad was born in Sebring, Ohio in 1948. He enlisted in the Army in 1965 and spent most of his career in West Germany, where he became fluent in German, married a German woman with 2 children, and had a 3rd child of his own. His Army take-home pay was $764 per month. His family's needs exceeded it. When Szabo, who is unknown to Conrad at the time, a colonel in the Hungarian Military Intelligence Service operating under Army cover, makes his offer in 1975, Conrad does not hesitate. What Conrad has access to is not peripheral material. He controls a vault containing the wartime general defense plans of multiple NATO units, documents specifying precisely where every unit would deploy, what routes they would take, how they would defend their positions, where the nuclear weapons were stored, and what the fallback strategies were if Soviet forces broke through. These are the plans the entire Western alliance would depend on if war started in Europe. Conrad photographs them. He passes the photographs to 2 Swedish couriers, Hungarian-born brothers named Sandor and Imre Keresik, who carry the material physically to communist intelligence services in Hungary and Czechoslovakia. Those services pass everything to the Soviet KGB. The courier system Conrad helps build ultimately delivers more than 30,000 top-secret materials between 1975 and 1986. Szabo is caught in Austria in 1989 and convicted of espionage, receiving a suspended sentence in exchange for identifying documents Conrad had sold. But by then, Conrad has already been recruiting his own network. He targets low-paid enlisted soldiers, offering large cash payments for whatever classified material they can obtain. One of his recruits, Roderick Ramsey, later alleges to the FBI that Conrad recruited dozens of personnel, including at least one member of the Army's own counter-espionage branch and at least one officer who later made general. 4 members of the ring are eventually convicted in Florida. Ramsey gets 36 years, Jeffrey Rondeau and Jeffrey Gregory each get 18 years, and Kelly Warren gets 25 years. Conrad retires from the Army in 1985 at the rank of Sergeant First Class and continues living in West Germany with his family. He believes retirement has insulated him. He continues working the ring from outside the Army. In 1985, U.S. Army counterintelligence agents working a separate investigation notice an unexplained pattern of intelligence compromise originating from V Corps in West Germany. They build a profile of the likely source. In 1986, they identify Conrad. The profile fits perfectly: a retired NCO with a take-home pension that does not come close to explaining his lifestyle. He has 2 new cars, multiple bank accounts full of cash deposits, and was once so flush that he failed to notice when several months of his retirement payments went undeposited. He has no second job. His wife does not work. The money has to be coming from somewhere. The problem is jurisdictional. Conrad is now a civilian living in West Germany. American military police have no authority to arrest him. The FBI has no jurisdiction on German soil. The Army spends 2 more years building an airtight evidentiary case before bringing German authorities in on the investigation. On August 23, 1988, German police arrest Conrad at his home. The trial opens in Koblenz on January 17, 1990, before Chief Judge Ferdinand Schuth of the Koblenz State Appellate Court. It is the most serious espionage case prosecuted in West Germany since the end of World War II. On June 6, 1990, Judge Schuth delivers his verdict. Konrad is found guilty on all counts of high treason and espionage on behalf of the Hungarian and Czechoslovak intelligence services. The sentence is life imprisonment. He is also fined 2 million marks, approximately $1.18 million, and ordered to forfeit all proceeds from his espionage activities. The court orders seizure of computers, cameras, and a long list of other property to help cover court costs. In his sentencing statement, Schuth does not use measured language. He says Konrad committed particularly deadly acts of treason that could have led to the destruction of West Germany and the NATO alliance. He says knowing the defense plans Konrad had sold, the Eastern Bloc would have been tempted to attack. He calls Konrad the worst traitor since the end of World War II. The court's formal conclusion is unambiguous. If war had broken out between NATO and the Warsaw Pact, the West would have faced certain defeat. NATO would have quickly been forced to choose between surrender and the use of nuclear weapons on German soil. Konrad dies of a heart attack in Diez prison on January 8, 1998. He is 50 years old. He is one of only 5 Americans ever convicted of espionage who is estimated to have received more than $1 million for spying, the others being Aldrich Ames, Larry Wu Tai Chin, Robert Hansen, and John Walker, the U.S. Our Army's official account of the case describes it as the most serious act of espionage ever perpetrated against NATO. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Case 4 takes us from a German courtroom to a forward operating base east of Baghdad, where a young Army intelligence analyst named Chelsea Manning downloads 750,000 classified files and hands every one of them to a website, producing what was, at the time, the largest unauthorized release of state secrets in American history. Case 4. Chelsea Manning Forward Operating Base, Hammer, Iraq, November 2009. Chelsea Manning is 22 years old, a private first class in the United States Army, assigned as an intelligence analyst to a unit stationed east of Baghdad near the Iranian border. Her job gives her access to classified databases covering the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, incident reports, diplomatic cables, intelligence assessments, video footage from military operations. She has a top-secret security clearance and a workstation connected to the secret Internet Protocol Router network, the classified system through which sensitive U.S. military and diplomatic communications flow. Over the following 6 months, she downloads approximately 750,000 files from that system and hands them to WikiLeaks. Manning was born on December 17, 1987 in Oklahoma City. Her father was a Navy intelligence analyst. She grew up in difficult circumstances. Her parents were both alcoholics and divorced when she was 13. She enlisted in the Army in 2007, finished basic training, and attended intelligence school at Fort Huachuca, Arizona, graduating in August 2008. She was assigned to the 2nd Brigade Combat Team, 10th Mountain Division, and deployed to Iraq in October 2009. At her forward operating base, what she finds in the classified databases disturbs her. The material includes internal records suggesting more than 15,000 civilian deaths in Afghanistan and Iraq had gone unreported. It includes evidence the U.S. military had failed to investigate documented incidents of detainee abuse and torture by Iraqi security forces, despite being legally obligated to do so. It includes a classified video from July 12, 2007, showing an American Apache helicopter crew in Baghdad firing on a group of men, killing 11, including 2 Reuters news agency employees. The crew is heard on the recording congratulating each other and encouraging further shooting at the wounded. Manning tries to contact the Washington Post and the New York Times to offer the material. Both contacts go nowhere. She then uploads the files directly to WikiLeaks. In February 2010, WikiLeaks begins publishing diplomatic cables. In April, it releases the Baghdad helicopter footage under the title Collateral Murder. In May 2010, Manning contacts an online acquaintance, a former hacker named Adrian Lamo, and tells him what she's done. Lamo notifies the Army's Criminal Investigation Command. Manning is arrested at FOB Hammer on May 29, 2010. The material she has released is the largest unauthorized disclosure of classified information in American history at that point. It includes 251,287 State Department diplomatic cables, more than 400,000 classified Army incident reports from the Iraq War, approximately 90,000 Army reports from Afghanistan, and the Baghdad airstrike video. The cables alone expose sensitive assessments of foreign leaders, diplomatic strategy, and intelligence sources that the U.S. government has to spend years managing with allied governments around the world. Manning is held for more than 3 years before her case comes to trial. During that time, she is confined at a Marine Corps brig in Quantico, Virginia, where conditions are ruled by a military judge to have been excessively harsh, resulting in a small sentence reduction. In February 2013, she pleads guilty to 10 of the lesser charges against her, while military prosecutors continue pursuing the full 22-count indictment, including the most serious charge, aiding the enemy, which carries a potential death sentence. The court-martial begins June 3, 2013. Manning chooses to be tried by the judge alone rather than by a jury. On July 30, 2013, Judge Colonel Denise Lind issues her findings. Manning is convicted of 19 of the specified charges, including 6 counts of violating the Espionage Act and theft of government property. She is acquitted of the single count of aiding the enemy, the charge that would have required the judge to find she knowingly provided intelligence directly to America's enemies. On August 21, 2013, Manning is sentenced to 35 years in prison, reduced in rank to Private E1, and dishonorably discharged. The sentence is the heaviest ever handed to a leaker or whistleblower in American history, nearly 20 times the previous record. Manning serves her sentence at the U.S. Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth, Arkansas. During her imprisonment, she publicly announces she is a transgender woman and requests hormone therapy, which the Army initially refuses before eventually granting it in 2015, the first time the military provides gender transition-related medical care to a prisoner. On January 17, 2017, President Barack Obama commutes all but 4 months of her remaining sentence, describing the original punishment as very disproportionate relative to what other leakers had received. Manning is released on May 17, 2017, having served approximately 7 years. Her conviction under the Espionage Act is upheld by the U.S. Army Court of Criminal Appeals on May 31, 2018. The 3-judge panel rules that the facts of the case leave no question as to what constituted national defense information, and that Manning was clearly on notice of the nature of what she was disclosing and its potential consequences for national security. In 2019, Manning is jailed again for contempt of court after refusing to testify before a federal grand jury investigating WikiLeaks. She spends 62 days in custody before being released. Case 5 does not involve a download or a dead drop. It begins with a soldier walking away from his post in Afghanistan in the middle of the night and ends with the United States trading 5 senior Taliban commanders to bring him home, a transaction that would haunt both the Army and the Obama administration for years. Case 5, Bo Bergdahl Paktika Province, Afghanistan. June 30, 2009. Shortly after midnight, Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl walks away from Observation Post Mest, a small combat outpost in eastern Afghanistan near the Pakistani border. He leaves his weapon behind. He takes water and a compass. He does not tell anyone where he is going. Bergdahl was born on March 28, 1986 in Sun Valley, Idaho. He joined the Army in 2008 and was assigned to the 1st Battalion, 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment, deploying to Afghanistan in 2009. Fellow soldiers later described him as intelligent but increasingly disenchanted. One member of his unit, Nathan Bethia, wrote publicly that Bergdahl had spoken about wanting to walk to India and had mailed his laptop and personal belongings home before he disappeared. The unit received an order not to discuss the circumstances of his disappearance while the situation was unresolved. Bergdahl's stated reason given years later is that he walked off his post with the intention of reaching a more senior officer to report what he believed were serious problems within his unit. He said he thought he could make it to a forward operating base roughly 20 miles away. He is captured by Taliban-affiliated fighters within hours of leaving the wire. The army immediately launches a search. The scale of it is significant. Hundreds of American service members are pulled into the effort across a dangerous region. During the search operations, a Navy SEAL named James Hatch is shot and suffers a career-ending injury. A member of the Army National Guard is also wounded in a separate firefight. Military Judge Army Colonel Jeffrey Nance later rules, during sentencing proceedings, that both men would not have been in those firefights if they had not been searching for Bergdahl. Bergdahl spends 5 years in Taliban and Haqqani network captivity in Afghanistan and Pakistan. He later describes being held in a cage, chained, and beaten repeatedly. He makes several escape attempts. He is recaptured each time. On May 31, 2014, President Barack Obama stands in the White House Rose Garden with Bergdahl's parents and announces a prisoner exchange. 5 senior Taliban commanders held at the detention facility at Guantanamo Bay are transferred to Qatar in exchange for Bergdahl's release. The Government Accountability Office subsequently finds that the Pentagon broke the law by failing to notify Congress 30 days in advance as required. The exchange generates intense political controversy. A National Security Advisor, Susan Rice, says Bergdahl served with honor and distinction. That statement is immediately disputed by soldiers who served with him. The Army charges Bergdahl on March 25, 2015, with 2 counts under the Uniform Code of Military Justice: desertion with intent to shirk important or hazardous duty under Article 85, and misbehavior before the enemy by endangering the safety of a command under Article 99. The misbehavior charge carries a maximum sentence of life in prison. A sanity evaluation finds Bergdahl has schizotypal personality disorder, but concludes he understood the nature and wrongfulness of his conduct at the time. On October 16, 2017, Bergdahl enters a guilty plea before military judge Army Colonel Jeffrey Nance at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He pleads guilty to both charges. In court, he says, "I left my observation post on my own." Prosecutors ask for 14 years in prison. The defense asks for a dishonorable discharge and no prison time, pointing to the 5 years Bergdahl spent in Taliban captivity, including documented torture, as sufficient punishment. On November 3, 2017, Nance sentences Bergdahl to a dishonorable discharge, reduction in rank from sergeant to private, and forfeiture of $1,000 per month from his pay for 10 months, no prison time. The sentence immediately draws fierce criticism from President Trump, who tweets that it is a complete and total disgrace to the country and the military. The conviction is upheld by the Army Court of Criminal Appeals and then narrowly by the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces in a 3-2 decision in August 2020. Bergdahl then files a civil suit in federal court. On July 25, 2023, U.S. District Judge Reggie Walton vacates the entire conviction. His 63-page ruling finds that military judge Nance had a disqualifying conflict of interest. On the same day Bergdahl entered his guilty plea, October 16, 2017, Nance had secretly applied for a job as a federal immigration judge within the Trump administration. He never disclosed this to the court. Walton finds that while there is no proof of actual bias, the appearance of partiality under the circumstances is enough under the law to void all of Nance's rulings from that date forward. The Justice Department appeals the decision. As of the filing of this dossier, the case remains before the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. The underlying facts have never been disputed. Bergdahl pleaded guilty to them under oath. He walked away from his post. Soldiers were wounded searching for him. He was exchanged for 5 Taliban commanders. Whatever the courts ultimately determine about the procedural fairness of his trial, those facts are on the record. Case 6 moves from Afghanistan to Hawaii, where an active-duty Army sergeant serving with the 25th Infantry Division secretly swore an oath of loyalty to ISIS in a ceremony conducted by undercover FBI agents and began handing classified military documents to people he believed were ISIS operatives. Case 6. Akaika Eric Kong, Oahu, Hawaii, early 2016. Sergeant First Class Akaika Eric Kang is 33 years old, an air traffic control operator with the 25th Infantry Division at U.S. Army Pacific Command, stationed at Schofield Barracks near Honolulu. He has served for 15 years. He has been deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, and South Korea. He holds multiple commendations. He is a trained mixed martial arts fighter with one professional bout on his record. He is also, by early 2016, spending 4 to 5 hours a day watching ISIS propaganda videos online, videos that show ISIS members executing civilians and military prisoners. He begins making statements to people around him expressing support for ISIS and a desire to join it. He discusses attacking the Honolulu Christmas parade. He discusses a suicide attack on Schofield Barracks itself. He tells someone he has been researching the most effective and painful ways to torture people. The FBI is listening. Kang was born on Oahu and grew up there, graduating from high school with honors in 2001. And he enlisted in the Army after the September 11th attacks. His father, Clifford, later described him as mostly a normal kid, introverted but not visibly troubled. At some point, Kang converted to Islam and he would teach his father verses from the Quran when he came home on leave. Nothing in those visits suggested what was coming. By the time the FBI takes notice of Kang in 2016, his statements have become specific. He tells an undercover operative he wants to travel to Turkey because ISIS has a consulate there. He says in a recorded conversation about the 2016 Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando that the shooter did what he had to do. He says America is the only terrorist organization in the world. He says in another recorded exchange that Hitler was right. A search of computer hard drives belonging to Kang turns up 18 military documents marked secret, 16 of which remain classified at the time of his arrest, and nearly 500 documents referencing ISIS or violence, including 13 issues of the Al-Qaeda magazine Inspire. The FBI places him under physical surveillance. He is watched continuously from the beginning of the investigation to the moment of his arrest. In late June and early July of 2017, Kang begins meeting with people he believes are ISIS operatives. They are undercover FBI agents. He does not know this. He provides them with sensitive, non-public military documents, some classified at the secret level, including classified air traffic control documents describing call signs, aircraft types, route points, mission procedures, and radio frequencies. He explains to the agents how they can use the information operationally. He then provides a commercially purchased drone worth over $1,100, a military chest rig, and other military-style gear. He explains to the undercover agents how ISIS could use the drone to track U.S. troop movements and evade American armored vehicles. 2 additional undercover FBI personnel then join the meetings, one posing as a high-ranking ISIS leader, described in the ceremony as a sheikh, and one playing the role of an ISIS fighter. Kong leads them through a 2-hour military combatives training session using his own weapons, teaching hand-to-hand combat techniques and marksmanship step by step. The sessions are video recorded. Kang understands that the recordings will be taken back to ISIS-controlled territory and used to train real ISIS fighters. He is given multiple opportunities during the meetings to stop, return the documents, and walk away. He does not take any of them. On July 8, 2017, Kang swears an oath of loyalty, known as Bayat, to ISIS and its leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. The ceremony is conducted by the undercover FBI agent posing as the ISIS sheikh. Kang kisses the ISIS flag. After the ceremony, he says he wants to get his rifle and go to downtown Honolulu and Waikiki Strip and start shooting. FBI agents arrest him the same day. He is indicted on terrorism charges on July 19, 2017. It is the first case in the state of Hawaii in which anyone is convicted for attempting to provide material support to a designated foreign terrorist organization. Kang pleads guilty on August 29, 2018 to 4 counts of attempting to provide material support to ISIS. He pleads as part of a negotiated agreement. In court, he says, "I know what I did was wrong. When I am released, I will not do it again." On December 4, 2018, senior U.S. District Judge Susan Oki-Malway sentences him to 25 years in federal prison, followed by 20 years of supervised release. The sentence structure is 240 months on 3 counts running concurrently and 60 months on a 4th count running consecutively, totaling 300 months, or exactly 25 years. Judge Malway tells Kang directly, "The conduct you committed was extremely serious. It had the potential to be disastrous. You had a distinguished career in the United States Army, and you had access and training that would have been valuable to the people associated with ISIS." Our Assistant Attorney General John Demers states for the record, "Kang swore to defend the United States as a member of our military, but betrayed his country by swearing allegiance to ISIS and attempting to provide it material support." Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Case 7 shares a surface resemblance to Kang, an active-duty Army soldier radicalized online, attempting to help ISIS kill American troops. But Cole Bridges went further in one specific direction. He used his own Army training to map out a detailed ambush plan targeting the soldiers he served alongside, and he asked for the maximum sentence himself. Case 7. Cole Bridges. Fort Stewart, Georgia, October 2020. Cole Bridges is 21 years old, a private first class assigned as a cavalry scout in the 3rd Infantry Division. He joined the Army in September 2019. He has been in uniform for just over a year. He is already in contact with someone he believes is an ISIS supporter with direct connections to ISIS fighters operating in the Middle East. That person is an undercover FBI employee. Bridges was born in Stowe, Ohio in 1999. Before he enlisted, going back to at least 2019, he was consuming jihadist propaganda online and expressing support for ISIS on social media. He did not wait until he was inside the Army to radicalize. He walked in already radicalized. Once inside, he has access to something ISIS cannot buy: authentic U.S. Army knowledge, combat tactics, training procedures, the specific ways American forces operate in the field, plan assaults, enter buildings, and respond to ambushes. Bridges begins sharing all of it. In October 2020, he starts communicating with the undercover FBI employee, referred to in court documents as the Online Covert Employee, or OCE, who presents himself as an ISIS supporter with connections to fighters in the Middle East. Bridges expresses frustration with the U.S. military and tells the OCE he wants to help ISIS. He then starts delivering. He provides the OCE with portions of a U.S. Army training manual. He provides guidance on military combat tactics with the explicit understanding that ISIS will use the material in planning future attacks. He advises on potential targets in New York City. By December 2020, he has moved past general guidance and started producing specific tactical instructions for attacking U.S. forces in the Middle East. What he produces is detailed and operational. He diagrams specific military maneuvers designed to maximize the lethality of ISIS attacks on American troops. He advises on the best method to fortify an ISIS encampment to ambush U.S. Special Forces, specifically recommending that certain buildings be wired with explosives so that American soldiers entering them will be killed. He is not speculating. He is drawing on his Army training to design a kill plan for the people he serves alongside. In January 2021, Bridges films himself in his U.S. Army-issued body armor, standing in front of a flag associated with ISIS, making a hand gesture symbolic of support for the group. He sends the video to the OCE. A week later, he sends a second video in which he uses a voice manipulator to narrate a propaganda speech supporting the anticipated ISIS ambush on U.S. troops. He is arrested at Fort Stewart in January 2021, shortly after sending the second video. When investigators search his communications and records, they find no evidence that he ever made direct contact with actual ISIS members. Every exchange was with the undercover FBI employee. He later tells his sentencing judge that when he was arrested and realized he had been talking to the FBI the entire time, his first reaction was relief. He is charged with 2 counts: attempting to provide material support to a designated foreign terrorist organization and attempting to murder U.S. military service members. He pleads guilty to both charges on June 14, 2023 in U.S. District Court. His sentencing hearing takes place on October 11, 2024 in Manhattan Federal Court before Judge Louis J. Lyman. It runs nearly 5 hours. 2 of Bridges' former Army commanders testify and ask the judge to impose the maximum sentence. U.S. Attorney Damian Williams states that Bridges used his U.S. Army training to pursue a horrifying goal: the murder of his fellow service members in a carefully plotted ambush. Then something unusual happens. Bridges himself addresses the court and asks for the maximum. He tells Judge Lyman, "Honestly, I do believe that I deserve the maximum sentence. I know what I did was wrong." He says he will carry regret for as long as he lives. The maximum available on both charges combined is 40 years. Judge Lyman sentences him to 14. He explains his reasoning. Bridges had shown genuine signs of remorse. He had expressed relief at learning he had been dealing with the FBI and not real terrorists. He had not attempted to obtain materials from other soldiers. And while the judge describes Bridges' willingness to advise ISIS on minimizing its own casualties during an ambush as the most chilling evidence in the case, he concludes that Bridges is not a hardened criminal. Master Sergeant Greg Fallon, Bridges' former platoon leader, fights back tears in his testimony and tells the court that the arrest destroyed the culture of his platoon, leaving everyone with a sense of defeat. The sentence is 168 months in prison, followed by 10 years of supervised release. Bridges is 24 years old at sentencing. Case 8 is a different kind of betrayal, not a soldier who turned to terrorism, all but a Pentagon analyst who spent 22 years passing classified intelligence to Chinese military officers and received 3 months in prison for it in one of the most controversial espionage sentences in American history. Case 8. Ronald N. Monteperto, Alexandria, Virginia. September 8, 2006. Ronald N. Monteperto, 67 years old, a former Defense Intelligence Agency analyst with a 22-year career in U.S. government intelligence, stands before U.S. District Judge Gerald Bruce Lee in federal court. He has pleaded guilty to 1 count of unlawful retention of classified documents. He has admitted in a plea agreement that he verbally passed both secret and top-secret intelligence to 2 Chinese military intelligence officers during approximately 60 meetings spread across nearly 2 decades. The Assistant U.S. Our attorney asks for at least 2 years in prison. The sentencing guidelines call for 4 to 5 years. Judge Lee sentences Monteperto to 3 months. Monteperto joined the Defense Intelligence Agency in 1981 as a China specialist. He spent his career analyzing Chinese military capabilities, arms sales, and strategic intentions, work that gave him regular authorized contact with Chinese embassy officials in Washington as part of a DIA program designed to gather information through dialogue. The arrangement was standard practice. The requirement was equally standard: report every contact, every conversation, every exchange of information to supervisors. Monteperto did not do that. According to his own admissions in the plea agreement, he began meeting privately with 2 Chinese military intelligence officers, Colonel Yang Qiming and Colonel Yu Zhenghe, as early as 1983. The meetings continued, by his own account, until at least 2001. Over those 18 years, in the course of roughly 60 face-to-face meetings, he verbally passed them both secret and top-secret information. He told investigators he could not remember the specific content of what he had given them. That failure of memory is documented in court papers. It also directly prevented prosecutors from charging him with the more serious crime of espionage, which would have required proving precisely what he said and to whom. A senior U.S. intelligence official, quoted by the Washington Times in reporting on the case, stated the conclusion plainly: he was a spy for China. In 1988, Monteperto read top-secret intelligence reports at the Pentagon regarding Chinese missile sales to Saudi Arabia and Chinese anti-ship cruise missile transfers to Iran. Shortly after reading each report, according to court testimony, he met with Colonel Yu. U.S. intelligence officials later concluded that a major American electronic eavesdropping operation targeting Chinese arms exports went dark around the same period. The program had been successfully monitoring Beijing's transfers of weapons technology to foreign governments. After Monteperto's disclosures in 1988, it stopped working. The coincidence was documented by investigators. The causal link was never charged. The first formal suspicion of Monteperto came in the late 1980s, when a Chinese defector identified him as one of 10 people Beijing considered dear friends, a term used by Chinese intelligence for unofficial assets who provided information and access. An investigation was opened in 1991. It was dropped due to insufficient evidence. Monteperto continued his government career. He left the DIA and moved to the National Defense University. He eventually became dean of the Asia-Pacific Center for Security Studies, a U.S. Pacific Command research institution in Hawaii that trains senior military and government officials from across the Asia-Pacific region. In 2001, investigators searching his residence in Springfield, Virginia, found classified documents he had retained without authorization. A second investigation was opened. In July 2003, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service ran a sting operation, approaching Monteperto about joining a China-related intelligence program and requiring him to undergo polygraph testing. Under questioning, he admitted to having verbally passed classified information to Chinese military officers. He pleaded guilty on June 28, 2006, to one count of unlawful retention of national defense information. He was dismissed from his position in 2004. He served 3 months at the minimum security federal prison at Fort Dix, New Jersey, and was released on February 25, 2007. At sentencing, Monteperto said, "I never meant to hurt my country in any way." His attorney argued he was an academic, untrained in handling foreign intelligence approaches, who had been gradually manipulated into making disclosures he did not fully understand were improper. What followed the sentencing was as revealing as the sentencing itself. Before the hearing, a significant number of current and former intelligence officials, including a serving DIA analyst named Lonnie Henley, wrote letters to the judge supporting Monteperto. Henley, who was the Deputy National Intelligence Officer for East Asia under the Director of National Intelligence, described Monteperto in his letter as a mentor and role model who was conscientious, concerned, and dedicated to the best interests of the United States. He also sent emails to intelligence colleagues criticizing the FBI investigation and suggesting Monteperto had been unfairly targeted. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence formally reprimanded Henley for poor judgment in writing the letter and sending the emails. He was later promoted to acting National Intelligence Officer for East Asia. The chairman of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, Representative Peter Hoekstra, announced a committee probe into the apparent support for Monteperto within the intelligence community. You would think, Hoekstra said publicly, that the intelligence community would set the standard for holding people accountable for mishandling and passing classified information to our enemies. The case exposed, in documented form, a network of senior intelligence and defense analysts who shared what critics called soft on China views and who actively intervened in the judicial process on behalf of one of their own, a man a senior U.S. intelligence official had called a spy for China. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Case 9 returns to the Walker spy ring, not to John Walker himself, but to the man who became his most important inside source after Walker retired from the Navy and who ultimately received the harshest sentence of the 365 years in prison. Case 9, Jerry Alfred Whitworth, Muldrow, Oklahoma, August 10, 1939. Jerry Alfred Whitworth is born in his grandparents' house next to a Baptist church in rural Arkansas River bottomland, 7 miles southeast of Muldrow. His father leaves before he is 1 year old and moves to California. His mother dies shortly after. His maternal grandparents and an uncle raise him. A teacher who knew him in elementary school later tells investigators he seemed to struggle to find a place to belong. He carries that quality into adulthood, into the Navy, and eventually into a spy ring that will be described at the time of his arrest as the most damaging espionage operation uncovered in the United States in 3 decades. Whitworth enlists in the Navy and trains as a radio man. He proves talented and dedicated, earning commendations and teaching assignments. In 1970, at the Naval Training Center in San Diego, he attends a communications school program directed by a man named John Anthony Walker. Walker notices something in Whitworth: a need for connection, a desire to fit in, an eagerness to be liked by someone he respects. He befriends Whitworth by inviting him sailing on weekends. The boat has been bought with Soviet money. Walker names it Dirty Old Man. The friendship deepens over the following years. In 1973, Whitworth is assigned to Diego Garcia on the remote communications relay facility in the Indian Ocean that serves reconnaissance aircraft, surveillance satellites, and NSA listening operations across the region. The posting is extraordinarily sensitive. After earning a commendation there, he re-enlists in late 1974. Walker begins the process of bringing him into the operation. Whitworth later claims he was told the intelligence was going to Israel, a U.S. ally. He claims he did not know until later that Walker was selling to the Soviet Union. By the time he finds out, he is already in. He continues providing material anyway, though his relationship with Walker grows strained over money. Whitworth eventually calculates that the information the two of them are delivering would cost the Soviet Union tens of millions of dollars to obtain through technical means. Walker is collecting a few $1,000s a month. Whitworth believes they are being massively underpaid. What Whitworth delivers across his years in the ring is extensive and technically specific. Among the materials the Soviets receive through him are cable traffic and key lists for the KW7, KY8, KG14, KWR37, and KL47 cryptographic systems, the machines that encode virtually all American military communications across multiple branches of service. He also provides data on the newest U.S. secure telephone system. He serves aboard multiple ships, including the USS Niagara Falls, the same posting Walker had held when the operation began, and later the aircraft carrier USS Enterprise, from which he carries off a foot-high stack of documents in his final days before retirement in October 1983. In May 1984, less than 6 months after leaving the Navy, Whitworth begins writing anonymous letters to the FBI field office in San Francisco. He signs them RUS from somewhere USA. The letters confess participation in a Soviet espionage ring operating for more than 20 years. They offer cooperation in exchange for immunity. The FBI receives the letters, fingerprints them, tests them for watermarks and indented writing, builds a profile of the unknown subject. They cannot identify him. Whitworth writes again in late May, repeating the offer of immunity. Over the summer, he seems to change his mind. His final letter, dated August 14, 1984, says he has decided it would be best to give up on the idea of cooperating. He goes silent. At no point do the FBI agents working the RUS file connect it to Walker. 6 months later, in November 1984, Barbara Walker calls the FBI Boston field office and reports her ex-husband as a Soviet spy. The RUS investigation and the Windflyer investigation eventually merge. Investigators identify Whitworth through a combination of his own letters, Walker's KGB correspondence referring to a source coded D, and Barbara Walker's recollection that her ex-husband had spoken often of a friend whose name sounded like either Wentworth or Whitworth. On June 3, 1985, FBI agents arrive at Whitworth's mobile home in Davis, California. They find him there with his wife Brenda. When an agent produces one of the RUS letters and asks if Whitworth recognizes it, he invokes his right to counsel and stops answering questions. A search warrant is obtained. Agents search the home and find financial records and other materials that become central evidence at his trial. Whitworth refuses to plead guilty. He insists throughout that he did not know the documents were going to the Soviet Union and that he believed he was helping an American ally. His trial in U.S. District Court in San Francisco runs 4 months. John Walker testifies against him as required by the plea agreement, and according to court and journalistic accounts, does so in particularly damaging terms, apparently in retaliation for the RUS letters that had come close to exposing Walker before Barbara Walker's call finished the job. The jury convicts Whitworth on July 24, 1986, on 12 of 13 counts, including 7 espionage charges. On August 28, 1986, U.S. District Judge John P. Vukasin, Jr. Sentences him to 365 years in prison without the possibility of parole for 60 years and fines him $410,000. It is the harshest sentence handed to any member of the Ring. Walker, who pleaded guilty and cooperated, received life with a parole eligibility date. Whitworth, who went to trial and said nothing, received 365 years. He is incarcerated at the United States Penitentiary in Atwater, California. His sentence will not be completed until October 2, 2048. He would need to be over 100 years old to serve it in full. Case 10 is the most recent in this series. An active-duty U.S. Army intelligence analyst sentenced just months ago for selling sensitive military information to a contact tied to the Chinese government, like a case the FBI describes as part of China's relentless campaign to steal American national defense secrets from inside the ranks. Case 10, Corbin Schultz, Fort Campbell, Kentucky, June 2022. Corbin Schultz is 22 years old, an Army intelligence analyst holding a top-secret/sensitive compartmented information security clearance, one of the highest clearance levels in the U.S. military. He has just received that clearance. Shortly after it is granted, a message arrives on a freelance web-based work platform. The message is from someone presenting themselves as a client from a geopolitical consulting firm interested in hiring Schultz to produce detailed analyses on U.S. military capabilities and planning. The person claims to live in Hong Kong. He is referred to in court documents as Conspirator A. Schultz responds. The relationship begins. Schultz was born in Wills Point, Texas. He joined the Army in November 2018 and trained as an intelligence analyst, eventually assigned to the 506th Infantry Battalion and later the 720th Military Police Battalion, 89th Military Police Brigade. His clearance gives him access to classified databases covering military tactics, weapon systems, operational orders, and intelligence assessments spanning multiple theaters of war. Conspirator A is not running a consulting firm. The DOJ determines he is a foreign national residing in the People's Republic of China who, based on clear indications documented in the case file, is likely connected to the Chinese government. Schultz appears to understand this. After the encrypted communications between them show him responding eagerly to the prospect of more money and agreeing to pursue increasingly sensitive material as the relationship develops. What Schultz delivers over the next 22 months is comprehensive. Between June 2022 and his arrest in March 2024, he sends Conspirator A at least 92 sensitive U.S. military documents. The list documented in court filings is specific. The Army's lessons learned from the Russia-Ukraine war as applicable to Taiwan's defense, his own unit's operational order before it deployed to Eastern Europe in support of NATO operations, Air Force technical manuals for the HH-60 helicopter, technical manuals for the F-22A fighter aircraft, one of America's most advanced jets, technical data on intercontinental ballistic missile systems, and NATO troop deployment locations, details on U.S. military exercises in South Korea and the Philippines, tactics for countering unmanned aerial systems in large-scale combat operations, and a document relating to U.S. military satellites. Many of the documents carry explicit export control warnings stating the material cannot be shared with foreign nationals. Schultz sends them anyway. Conspirator A's requests grow progressively more specific and more sensitive as the operation continues. The handler explicitly tells Schultz he wants materials that are not publicly available and encourages him to seek out higher classification levels, using the phrase exclusiveness and CUI and better, meaning controlled unclassified information or better. Schultz agrees. In encrypted communications quoted in court documents, When conspirator A suggests he can earn more money, Schultz replies, "I hope so. I need to get my other BMW back." The operation is not simply a bilateral exchange. Schultz and conspirator A discuss expanding the ring. They identify a friend of Schultz's, a fellow Army intelligence analyst assigned to the Department of Defense's Indo-Pacific Command, the combatant command responsible for China's regional sphere of influence, as a target for recruitment. They discuss approaching him in a nice and slow fashion. The recruitment attempt is documented in the case file. In exchange for the entire operation, 92 documents, 22 months, one of the most sensitive categories of American military intelligence, conspirator A makes at least 14 separate payments to Schultz totaling approximately $42,000. At the FBI's Nashville field office, working with the U.S. Army Counterintelligence Command, arrests Schultz at Fort Campbell on March 7, 2024. He is charged with 6 counts: conspiracy to obtain and transmit national defense information, unlawful export of controlled technical data, conspiracy to export defense articles without a license, and bribery of a public official. On August 13, 2024, Schultz pleads guilty to all charges against him. On April 23, 2025, he is sentenced to 84 months in federal prison by a judge in the Middle District of Tennessee, followed by a term of supervised release. He is 25 years old. Attorney General Pamela Bondi states at sentencing, "This defendant swore an oath to defend the United States. Instead, he betrayed it for a payout and put America's military and service members at risk." FBI Director Kash Patel issues a direct statement. "The People's Republic of China is relentless in its efforts to steal our national defense information, and service members are a prime target." Brigadier General Rhett R. Cox, Commanding General of the U.S. Army Counterintelligence Command, states, "Schultz's actions put Army personnel at risk, placing individual gain above personal honor. He urges active duty and veteran personnel to report any suspicious activity fitting similar patterns." The documents Schultz sold covered the very scenarios the U.S. military considers most critical to its strategic posture in the coming decade: Taiwan, Korea, the Pacific, NATO's eastern flank, and the capabilities of America's most advanced weapons. He sold them for just over $42,000. See, he joins a list that now spans 6 decades of American military and intelligence personnel who decided that what they knew was worth more to an enemy than it was to the country they swore to protect. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.